Weeks ago, battery manufacturing facility IM3NY in Endicott announced the layoffs of most of their staff. This prompted concerns from many residents over operations at the facility and where the facility's funding has gone. 12 News' Cal Spisak joins us now live with the latest details on what he's been able to uncover.
And thanks, Nicole. Owners of the IM3NY battery manufacturing plant in Endicott have long branded the facility as the future of lithium-ion. But a recent lawsuit that mentions the company questions whether the company's product even worked like they promised. We spoke with top-ranking company officials today about what's really going on at the factory. Questions have been raised about the quality of batteries produced at the IM3NY lithium-ion battery manufacturing plant in Endicott. The Australian Securities and Investments Commission have claimed in a lawsuit against Magnus Energy, the parent company of IM3NY, that the batteries were swelling, leading to 30% of the battery cells being unsellable. Board member at IM3NY, Shalisha Breddy, says the swelling is common in new plants starting up.
When the facility was being commissioned, the early part of the factory setup, we were having swelling challenges, and this is very common phenomena in plants when you are setting up a new factory. Things could go wrong. However, last 12 months we have been producing product that meets all the specifications. We have had that product certified now through different certifications needed, and the product meets all the spec today.
However, the lawsuit in Australia is not the only issue facing the flagship project. Concerns among local residents arose about a month ago after the company announced layoffs at the facility. Breddy says the factory has been running the same one-shift operation since the beginning of 2024.
What I can tell you is that we were running one-shift operation at the beginning of the year. We are still running one-shift operation. We have achieved certain certifications that have now allowed us to go more aggressive with customer validations, shipping product to the customers, and we have been doing that.
Likewise, the lawsuit alleges that in March of 2023, IM3NY was expected to be cash negative, and a projected need of $60 million of further capital would be needed to achieve their originally planned production. Breddy says that the plant has been approved for New York State capital funds, but they have not taken any federal funding.
We have been approved for $13.25 million of New York State capital, and we have not drawn down on that, except outside that training $500,000 that we talked about. And there is no federal money that has gone into this factory at all. It's all private capital put in by our shareholders and the debt capital providers.
And Empire State Development told 12 News that IM3NY is eligible for up to $3.5 million through performance-based Excelsior Jobs Tax Credit Program, and did draw 2 disbursements for 2021 and 2022, and up to $4 million through the Upstate Revitalization Initiative, but they have not been claimed or awarded any part of the grant incentive. 12 News also reached out to Senator Chuck Schumer, whose office was aggressive in working to get federal funding for IM3NY, but have not received a response.